If you have ADHD, the Pomodoro method fails you in one of two ways. The first is that the timer is running and you can't seem to get started. You watch the 25 minutes countdown, you know that you're wasting them, but knowing it doesn't help. You just feel worse. The second is that you do get started, but it takes you 20 minutes to get into the zone. You finally focus, and that's when the timer goes off. It pulls you out at the exact moment that you got in. Either way, you end up in the same place. The timer works for everyone else, so you assume that the problem is you. But it isn't. The Pomodoro technique was not designed for an ADHD brain. It was designed for one person, for himself, in 1987. It makes 3 assumptions about how focus works for an ADHD brain, and all 3 are wrong. I'll go through all 3, then I'll explain why I think the whole thing qualifies as a psyop, and I'm not using that word loosely. So, the Pomodoro technique was invented in 1987 by Francesco Cirillo, a university student in Italy. He used a kitchen timer shaped like a tomato. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. He set it to 25 minutes and worked in those blocks, and it worked great for him. Then it spread. Books, apps, courses, productivity channels. And for more than 30 years, it has been one of the most recommended focus tools in the world. And almost nobody asked an obvious question. Does it work the same for every single person? It worked for one student, and everyone else assumed it would work for them too. So the Pomodoro technique assumes that when you sit down and you start the timer, your brain is ready to focus. You start the clock and focus begins. For a lot of ADHD brains, that's not how it works. Whether you can focus depends on how alert and activated your brain is in that moment. If your brain isn't switched on yet, focus is not available, and starting that timer does not change that. Russell Barkley, one of the most cited ADHD researchers in the world, puts this at the base of how ADHD works. Underneath focus, underneath willpower, there's a more basic question. Is the brain activated enough to do the task at all? If it isn't, everything built on top falls down. You can't hold information in your head. You can't stay on one task, and you lose track of time. Time blocking, deep work, Pomodoro, every research method assumes that your brain is already activated and you just need to aim it. For a lot of ADHD adults, your brain isn't activated. There's nothing better to point at the work. So you start the timer, 20 minutes pass, 30 minutes, 90 minutes, and nothing happens. Here's a major reason an ADHD brain often isn't switched on when you need it. It's because of the body clock. Not your habits, but your clock itself, your internal clock, is running late. A research group in Amsterdam led by psychiatrist Sandra Kooij has studied sleep and body clocks in adults with ADHD for years. They found that roughly 3/4 of them have a body clock that runs late. Not because of any bad habits like sleeping late or eating before bed, but the clock itself is set late. And here's what that means in practice. Melatonin, the hormone that makes you sleepy, arrives late at night. Cortisol, the hormone that wakes you up, comes up late and weak in the morning. The front of your brain, the part you plan and focus with, is not yet fully online. So when you sit down to work at 9 a.m., your body is still running something closer to 7:30. And that's the moment that productivity advice tells you to start a timer and concentrate. But there's nothing there to concentrate with yet. You're not lazy. Your body is genuinely about 2 hours behind. And this part is partly fixable. Getting daylight in the first hour after you wake up helps. It helps shift your clock a little bit earlier. On its own, the effect is modest. A badly delayed clock usually needs a proper plan. You need daylight, sometimes melatonin at night, and a conversation with the doctor. But none of that is what a timer does. A timer cannot move a body clock. The third assumption is the one that I find hardest to forgive. The Pomodoro, like most productivity advice, expects you to sit still and work. Movement is treated as a distraction. Rapport, a researcher at the University of Central Florida, spent about 20 years studying movement and ADHD. The fidgeting, the tapping, the kid who can't stay still in his chair. He wanted to know what that movement was actually for. In one study, he took 2 groups of boys, around 30 with ADHD and 30 without, and he had them do 2 things. First, they watched a Star Wars clip. Then they worked through hard memory tasks. He measured how much they moved the entire time. During the Star Wars clip, the boys with ADHD sat still. They moved far more during the memory task, about twice as much as the control group. And the movement was not random. It increased at the hardest moments of the task. The movement was not the ADHD getting in the way. The movement was how these kids stayed focused. Moving raised their alertness enough to keep going. The fidgeting was doing a job. For decades, adults told these kids to sit still. They were telling them to stop doing the one thing that was helping them concentrate. And it's the same for adults. The movie playing in the corner while you work, getting up to walk around mid-task, headphones on before you can start. That's the same mechanism. You're raising your own alertness so that you can focus. It is not a discipline problem. It was working. I don't take medication, so for me, it's a walk or the gym. Lifting in the morning is the most reliable way I have found for my brain to get activated for the day. And I'm not treating it like a wellness habit, but it's the closest thing to a substitute for medication. So the word psyop, why does this count as a psyop? Here's what I mean by it, because I am not using it loosely. I don't think that there is a conspiracy. Nobody sat in a room and decided to do this. Cirillo just had something that worked for him. There's no villain to this. That is actually the worst version. A conspiracy can be exposed. This cannot, because there's nothing to expose. A tool built for one brain got sold to every brain, and a belief came from it. The belief is that if a timer doesn't work for you, then the problem is you. Nobody had to enforce that belief. It spread on its own. To productivity videos, to comment sections, to every late night that you spent wondering why you can't do what everyone else seems to do so easily. The research that contradicts it has been available for 20 years. It made no difference. The belief kept spreading because nobody would have actually looked for the research. That is what a psyop comes down to. It does not need someone lying to you. It just needs everyone to stop checking. Here's how I work now. I don't take anyone's productivity system and create a one-size-fits-all solution. And I don't force my wife to fit it. I make one change and I run it for a few weeks in my real actual working life. And I see if it survives the normal week. Then I look up the research to understand why it worked and why it didn't. I live it first and then I check the research second. And if you want a starting point for the daylight, the movement, and the things to do in order, I've put everything in a free short guide. I put the link down below in the description. So that's the foundation. I'll build the rest of it here on this YouTube channel. Update you guys with my research and anything else that I come across when it comes to ADHD. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.